Good morning, baseball fans. It is Monday, May 15th. This is a special bonus episode of Bourbon and Baseball. Like, if this was an OnlyFans, you'd have to pay extra for this shit, but it's not. So we give this content to you absolutely free because that's who I am as a person. So typically it would be Suzy and Shelby. Unfortunately, Shelby is no longer with us. I gotta not keep saying it like that. I'm so sorry. It sounds like Shelby is dead. Shelby's not dead. Shelby just had to stop doing the podcast because she has no time anymore. So unfortunately, Shelby is not here on the podcast any longer. But I have a special guest, Kelsey Burd from Peace, Love, and Baseball. And is it Babes?
It is.
Okay. Babes podcast. So the Peace, Love, and Baseball is your own podcast, correct?
It is, yeah.
Okay. And then Babes is a fun collaboration with you, a Cardinals fan, and two Yankees fans. Am I?
It is, yes. You nailed it.
That'd be super interesting. You just throw an Astros fan in there just for just complete chaos, and I think it's a good time.
Yeah, we definitely need to have you on at some point and just let that all play out.
I think I spoke to John. We DM'd a little bit, and I think we're going to try and get that scheduled like right before the Astros Yankees series.
Oh, awesome! Yeah,
and so it'll just be all kinds of fun. We'll have a good time. But
love it.
Yeah. So this is Kelsey Burd, and I've already given her the warning. But if you're new around here, this is the first time you're listening. If you're listening because you love Kelsey, just know that this is a rated R podcast. Mainly because I cannot control myself, and I just say all the expletives. So not safe for work. If you have small children around, maybe earmuffs. I don't really care. That's on you if you want to. I'm not going to judge you. Whatever you want to do with the small children.
Actually, there's Suzy, not going to be yesterday I gave my mom a shirt for Mother's Day that said "Good moms say bad words." So we're on the same page there.
I'm currently wearing a shirt that says something to the lines of, "I would be much better at not swearing in front of my kids, if they were much better at making me not lose my shit." So
there you go.
I forgot about the shirt. Like, I had just pulled it out of my closet randomly, and I used to wear it when they were much smaller and like didn't know how to read.
Sure.
And now that they're gonna be 8, they looked at my shirt and goes, "Mama, your shirt says a bad word." And I'm all, what does it say? and they're like, their eyes got all big. And they're like, we can't say it, Mama. I was like, what are you? Because earlier, like last week, they came home and they're like, "Mama, one of my friends said the S word." And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, like they said, like one of your little friends said shit.
Mm-hmm.
No. I was like, well, what did they say, baby? And she goes, they said the S word. And I'm all, and she goes, stupid. And I was like, okay. Yeah, that's
don't be 8 again.
Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah, that's not great. That's not great. Yeah.
Not a nice word.
So I try not to cuss around my children, and because I try not to cuss around my children, anytime they're not within earshot, it just all like just word vomit comes out. So
that's fair.
Yeah. So again, my husband's like, they get this from you, like, this, like, I'm all, I don't know what you're talking about, like, I don't cuss around them, but whatever. Anyhow, so Kelsey, you are a Cardinals fan for how long?
Well,
lifelong?
Approximately, 33 and a half years.
Okay.
I was born into a Cardinals family. I guess, like, my dad grew up in St. Louis, and my grandfather actually worked at Sportsman Park in St. Louis back in the late 50s. But my mom is a Cubs fan. So, and her whole family, like, really diehard Cubs fans. And so I grew up in Central Illinois, which is smack dead in between Chicago and St. Louis. And because my dad was just more into baseball than my mom, and it was like such a thing that was ingrained in his family and family history, he got us all on the right page, fortunately. And all 3 of his children are diehard Cardinals fans. So my mom stands strong, though. I got to give it to her. And we're actually all going to London together in about a month for the Cubs Cardinals series. And she's going to wear her Cubs gear among all of us.
I love that. That's going to be fun. Those family pictures will be delightful. I can't wait to.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of good content.
So, So Kelsey, we came across each other on baseball Twitter,
Yeah.
and with this whole Wilson Contreras Cardinals catching situation, I really wanted to kind of take the temperature, if you will, of an actual Cardinals fan, because we can all kind of look on the outside from our fandom and be like, what's going on over there?
Yeah.
Why? What's happening? So, for some context, if you guys aren't following all of the baseballs, uh, in the offseason, the St. Louis Cardinals signed Wilson Contreras to, what was it, 3 years, 5 years, 90
5
million?
years. 5
5
years,
years.
87.5 million with an option
Um,
for a sixth. Yeah.
to be their everyday catcher because, Yadier Molina just retired, rode off into the sunset with Albert Pujols, and apparently, Wilson Contreras, surprisingly, to I don't know, to anybody's surprise, front office's surprise, I don't know,
What?
it is not Yadier Molina. Like,
Wait, he's not?
what? Yeah, I don't like. I feel like maybe you should have seen this before. I don't know, front office. Like, what are you doing? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Do we
So
look at stats? Do we follow our player profiles at all? Like this also, it's worth noting that this is the largest like free agent contract that in the organization's history for a player that was not already with the organization. So it was kind of out of character already. And when you make that kind of a move, you're like, all right, well, you're really all in on this guy. And all of the right communication came out between both parties of how they were on the same page, of how open communication was so important to both of them, and, clear expectations. And Wilson's our guy. Like, he's going to be such a great organizational fit. I think what was most interesting to me right off the bat was that there is, clearly some kind of disconnect between these clear expectations of
quote unquote.
right. We didn't really even talk about as a fan base and the writers and people who cover the Cardinals specifically, and certainly not nationally, did not even talk about like the obvious transition that would have to be made fundamentally as a team around this change. Like Yadier Molina is retiring. It's well documented that there have been teams in the past when their franchise catcher retires that they have trouble bouncing back and struggle to kind of all get on the same page. And certainly that's something that they had to have foresight with, right?
You would think.
You would think. Right. And so they obviously made it a point to want to get this big signing and get a big exciting catcher, one way or another for the team.
Right.
But it's like, was that literally the only thing, like just the optics of it were the only thing that you were worried about? Because we didn't even question the fact that like, obviously there would be changes behind the scenes and all of that stuff would be dealt with, and clearly it wasn't, or at least not effectively.
Right. Not to the level at which you would think would happen. So, I mean, obviously Yadier Molina, defensive wizard, right? Like I feel like, okay, so I don't know if you know this, but I became a baseball fan in 2018. I have a very brief knowledge of baseball before that.
Gotcha.
And so my view of Yadier Molina is not good hitting Yadier Molina.
Sure.
Is the defense of Yadier Molina, where literally he is a brain extra pitching coach on the field type of thing. Not for his bat. And then when I saw old games, I'm all, hold on, Yadi could hit? What?
Right.
What? Where was it? Oh, Yadier Molina has been in the league for 93 years. I see now,
Exactly.
So, now when you go from defensive amazing catcher that did all of the homework behind the scenes, all of that fun stuff, to apparently Wilson Contreras, who I guess doesn't do the homework or doesn't do the homework to the level that Yadier Molina did. Like, I mean, you're not signing Wilson Contreras for that. Like, you're signing Wilson Contreras for his bat, essentially.
Right. Different priorities. And again, so that's why us as a fan base, like, we don't feel let down by him because we did not have the expectation that he would be Yadier Molina, one of, if not the best defensive catchers of all time. Like, this is his 8th major league season. It has been well documented by the Cubs, covered by the Cubs, but also covered nationally, that like he is not your go-to defensive catcher. He has even been taken away from calling games at certain points. He only caught, I think, less than 50 games for the Cubs last season because of that, because they were saying along the same lines, like, hey, this could possibly be contributing to, what we're ultimately getting out of our pitching. And for that, they had Yan Gomes catch a lot last season. And I think there's even stats to back it up that like the pitcher's ERA overall with Yan Gomes was noticeably lower than with Wilson Contreras. And that's all neither here nor there, because quite honestly, like if you want to pin it on him, I'd like to give you a definition, if I can, Suzy. The definition that I want to give you is for the word, or I guess 2 words, scapegoat. And a scapegoat is a person who is blamed for the wrongdoings, mistakes, or faults of others, especially for reasons of expediency. And that is what I think we're seeing here with Wilson Contreras.
Yeah. Well, so a couple weeks ago, this all happened, where it came out that Wilson Contreras is moving away from catching duties and just going into DH and then outfield. And then they were like, oh, just kidding, not the outfield, just DH. And when it first came out, I was like, outfield? I'm like, St. Louis Cardinals have like 90 gajillion outfielders that are good.
Yeah.
Do you mean to tell me you're going to throw them in the outfield? Like, what are we doing? And then for him to be like, oh, just kidding, it's just gonna be DH. Well, but weren't you DHing like your really good outfielders that couldn't get in the why? What's happening over there? And then it came out that the pitchers were, I guess, basically, was there a mutiny? I mean, was that the rumor that the pitchers basically did this? Like, what? Because
that's what's weird about it too, is that
Wilson was just blindsided. No?
Yes. And it did very much so seem. There is nothing like hard and legitimate from any of the pitchers saying, hey, this is my problem. Also, like, these aren't pitchers who didn't have these problems before. So let's be clear on that. And nothing against them. Like, I'm not here to trash them either, but it was not directly from their mouths saying like, hey, I can't get my shit together because of this new catcher that you signed. And that was like somehow an oversight because they weren't all together in spring training because of the World Baseball Classic. No.
Right.
So,
well, but I mean, Wilson Contreras stayed back from the World Baseball Classic to learn the staff, correct?
Yeah. And so 2 of the starting pitchers on the Cardinals were in the World Baseball Classic, but those are also the 2 guys that I don't think you're going to hear anything like that in the media from. First of all, Adam Wainwright, who has spoken only on behalf of Wilson Contreras and is more than happy to work with him and is the last person who's going to blame any of his issues on anybody else. And then Miles Mikolas, who even all of last season and maybe even the season prior was primarily caught by Andrew Knizner. So they just seem to be a better pairing. And that's been pretty consistent. Like, he was caught a couple times by Wilson Contreras, but you kind of always expect to see Knizner, our backup catcher, out there with Miles Mikolas anyway, because they're just kind of a duo that seems like a good fit. They are close friends. So they, definitely have a dynamic that works for them on and off the field, which is great. So I can't imagine that those 2 guys, and those 2 aren't really the ones that you hear any kind of inkling of, oh, they had a problem with him. It's really like, I think who people have accused of maybe saying things like that is Jack Flaherty. And Jack Flaherty certainly never said like, hey, my issues are because of Wilson Contreras. He may have said at some point weeks ago something about how that is one of the adjustments that I'm working with. But since day one in spring training, Jack Flaherty and Wilson Contreras seem to have a very good, decent rapport. They seem to really enjoy working together. And there's never been any seeming miscommunication there or like, glaring issue of, hey, this guy is holding me back. And nothing like that was ever said. So that narrative is still in my mind, at least from what I see, being controlled by the Cardinals front office.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So, like I said, after this whole thing had come out, I had listened to 43 different versions of like kind of national podcasts and shows, talking about Wilson Contreras and his lack of defensive capabilities and whatnot. And it was super interesting because a lot of those shows brought up, the Astros, quote unquote defensive catcher, Martin Maldonado. And as an Astros fan, it was just super interesting because I'm like, yeah, he is a big giant black hole in our lineup, and quite honestly, defensively, he's not even really that good either. But he down here is being touted as basically the pitcher whisperer. That the pitchers are just are so much better with him behind the dish versus anybody else. And that was kind of the narrative that was being played out by our manager, Dusty Baker, because we have a very young backup catcher, very young. Talking like rookie backup catcher that the front office is trying to say is going to get 300 plate appearances, blah blah blah. There's no way he's going to get that many plate appearances because Martin Maldonado keeps being run out there. And so it just seemed very very clear cut to me that I'm like, if you would like a quote unquote defensive catcher, like I have one that we will just plate on a silver platter and just give to you, just hand over to you. Like you don't even like give us a grilled cheese sandwich and we'll be good. It's one of those things. And so I was like, surely they can't feel like this. Like actual Cardinals fans, you don't feel like this, right? Like you knew that you were not going to get a defensive replacement for Yadier Molina. Like you knew that you were getting a bat. Like so.
Right. And no one signs a long-term free agent contract like banking on the player that they're going to turn him into.
Right. Well, but I mean, like if that was even the plan, like wouldn't Yadi have stayed on and I don't know, like trained him or worked with him? And I don't know. I wasn't paying that close attention. I don't know if that happened during the offseason or during spring training. So none of that happened, right?
None of that happened. No. And a lot of that, I mean, I think you mentioned on your last episode quotes from our president of baseball operations, John Mozeliak, which there's a lot to unpack with this because even on that side of things, like John Mozeliak signed his last contract extension. He's been very open that he is quite likely, more than likely, stepping away after the 2025 season. So there's also a lot of speculation that now there's like different powers that be that are really the ones in control of this narrative and the conversation that's coming out around it, which that honestly like answered a lot. It made a lot of sense to me, answered a lot of questions that I had, because there is, in my mind, I'm just like, there is nothing that is not calculated and well executed that comes directly from John Mozeliak. He is the most tenured head of baseball ops in the league. Like that, this is just not the look that you see from them. So when that came out, I was like, oh, okay, well, that answers that question a little bit, that, perhaps they're trying to let some new people stir the pot and it's not going so well, or, there's going to be growing pains and things like that. But one of the things I think that you mentioned that he said was perhaps there were like nuances on the catching side that we didn't have to worry about and we didn't even notice. And so there's a lot of speculation around that, as it's like, did you even know? Were you even aware of the difference maker that Yadier Molina really was? And the biggest thing that I see with that is that Yadier Molina, John Mozeliak spoke to how Yadier Molina was like having a coach on the field. And you mentioned something along those lines as well, in his ability to evolve his decision-making along with the game. To me, that is not a skill that I need my catcher to have. It is a skill that we need our coaching staffs to have. So I still come back to, like, that's amazing that we had Yadier Molina, but one of the things that goes side by side with appreciating for Yadier Molina for everything that he was is knowing that he was the, one and only, like he was elite and he was this once in a lifetime franchise catcher, and expecting someone else to live up to those expectations, especially with little to no guidance on your end, because clearly you didn't even know what Yadier Molina was doing. Like, scapegoat.
Right.
It's not,
right.
You can't put that on him.
But now was it a Katie Wu Athletic article that I read that basically after like a week of this, basically Wilson Contreras is now going back to the catching?
Yes. So he is starting tonight as the catcher with Jack Flaherty, which is the one that everyone's been like, oh, but he was blaming Wilson. And he wasn't. And he's also the one that got to work with him the most because he was not in the World Baseball Classic. So Yeah, he's going to start with Jack Flaherty tonight against the Brewers. And it's been a week, I think, since he was removed from catching duties. And all of this for what? The most interesting thing that I read was from Derek Gould of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, who did an interview with Wilson Contreras being like, okay, so what changed? Like, what are you excited to implement? And he, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but he was basically like, yeah, no, not really anything. Like, it's my game. And I'm excited to get back. I basically told the organization, like, I'm a catcher and I would like to catch. Thank you. So
like, I mean, at this point, like when I read that, I was like, so did it, because it seemed to me, again, outside fan base looking in, that basically the front office kind of, it looked like, told the pitchers, you know what, shut the fuck up, do your job, locate your pitches. It's not Wilson Contreras' fault that you're basically shitty. So we're gonna remove him and put him back behind the plate where he belongs. That again, that outside looking in. So because I think it was a quote by Jack Flaherty that was like, yeah, we got to work, and I kind of ironed out some issues or something like that. And I'm all, in a week
right.
you ironed out your issues, like,
yeah, and I mean, they've been super vague about what progress is being made. Like, it's those just answers that you hate to hear from
like,
yeah. I'm gonna answer you without answering you.
Yeah, I was like, okay, so you didn't, so during spring training, during, I don't know, like the first like 6 weeks of baseball, like you couldn't work those out, but in a week you got them all ironed out. Oh, okay, cool.
Right. And the only thing, like I mentioned earlier, that I've heard about, like the reason they couldn't address that in spring training is because a couple of guys were at the World Baseball Classic. And I understand that it is different, that like pitchers are only pitching a couple innings. But in the first, especially like 2 weeks of the season, it was actually the first and sometimes second inning that was like the worst for the Cardinals pitchers. So that really didn't hold any water for me either. Like, I know the approach to the game as a whole is entirely different in a spring training game. That's fine. But then, like, what were you working on in spring training? And even so, even if this is really an issue that has come up, regardless, the way that it was handled, the way that it's been communicated was just completely unnecessary for the purpose of what they're saying it is, right? So the reason that I'm so adamant about him being used as a scapegoat is because the Cardinals have had pitching issues. I mean, fundamentally, the way that they are built, starting pitching organizationally, like organization-wide, is problematic, and is something that the fans have been critical of for quite a while now. I cannot remember the name of the minor league player who came out recently on sports radio and said something along the lines of like, I was instructed by player development to stop trying to strike people out and to throw, as few pitches as possible to get ground outs. And like, that's our approach is pitch to contact. And if you look at the guys in their rotation, like that is exactly how they're built. And it's not just the guys in the major leagues, it's all of them. So the Cardinals have gotten away with a lot in terms of not spending on pitching because of their elite defense, none less than Yadier Molina. I think we're seeing that now more than ever. But like I said, I do believe that his ability to evolve the game plan was unique. It is something that is very difficult to teach. Certainly not something that you teach in a week. And if the Cardinals really wanted to continue to rely on that and stick with their starting pitching philosophy, then why didn't they just have Andrew Knizner, our backup catcher, who has been behind Yadier Molina for 4 seasons now? Like, if that's what they wanted to continue to rely on, again, optics not great, but who cares if it's what works? And he has been catching the games now, and who they have said, like, we trust you with this because clearly it's not Wilson Contreras. We're not going to take a step back. We're not going to switch you guys out. Like, no, he needs to come out. He cannot catch until we deal with this. So if that is really what the issue was, like, just let Andrew Knizner be your catcher. And now we have Trace Barrera, who is like, I mean, he was with the Nationals, I believe, last year, but he's like the backup catcher who came up. And you talked about how they deactivated or they released Taylor Motter because of that, and how all of that did make a lot of sense. And the only reason I'll say that did make sense is because there wasn't room for Taylor Motter either, because of all of the jam in the infield and the outfield. And that is because my ultimate point and the ultimate purpose, I think, for all of this is because the Cardinals are good at developing the same kind of players that they are spending money on. So we have like 3 or 4, I think, like third basemen who were like by trade third baseman, right? So we have Nolan Arenado. So anyone who comes up, Jordan Walker, by trade a third baseman, Nolan Gorman, by trade a third baseman, Andrew Kisner, our backup catcher, was an All-American collegiate third baseman. But we are repurposing them and for their bats, obviously, because we want to keep them in our system, and that's all fine and dandy. But obviously, we're not going to have that elite defense that we can rely on. Then second base, outfield, wherever else you're going to put them.
Right.
And that pitch to contact philosophy for your pitchers is going to suffer in that regard too. So I believe that this is all in place, put in place by the front office as a way to kind of distract from the fact that they really need to overhaul their starting pitching from bottom to top or top to bottom, whichever way you want to look at it. Because as the game has evolved, even in the last 5 years, in the age of analytics, with the rule changes, which I think it's certainly too soon to say, for certain that those are, but it's easy to see the writing is on the wall. It's only going to make it harder for these pitch to contact guys to be able to get away with what they've been getting away with, and to avoid the Cardinals having to do an entire rebuild of their starting rotation. They've got to be able to do the business of making the trades, and not just at the major league level. And they, to maintain any kind of leverage with that, they have to distract from the fact that they don't have a lot to go off of in terms of starting pitching, and they are going to have to
address
more
it at
than
some
or
point.
give away more than they want to. Yeah, to be able to address it the way that they need to at this point. I think they're in a really tough spot with it.
Well, now, in the minors though, don't you have a couple of young, is it Matthew Liberatore?
Yeah, so we have Matthew Liberatore, who honestly looks like a different player this season than he did last season. And so that's encouraging.
He was up for a cup of coffee last season too, right?
He was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, was there another one too?
So we have Tink Hence, who is in single A right now. He's I think he's only 19, but he was in spring. We did see him a lot in spring training.
Okay.
But again, the development of those players have been notoriously bad. So it's not something that I'm looking at right now and thinking we can.
There's the salvation.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's not coming soon enough. And they're still using this approach that is not going to serve them as well at the major league level, ultimately.
Okay.
I am surprised a little bit that we haven't seen Matthew Liberatore yet, but I'm not, because they're paying. The Cardinals are also known for using the guys they're paying, right?
Right.
Paul
no matter what.
Point. Yeah, no matter what. And again, I get it. We all want to be able to utilize the things that we pay for, and it's a bummer when we can't. Right. But that is why we haven't seen Matthew Liberatore, because Steven Matz is on a 4-year, $44 million deal, and we're paying him that regardless if he's in the bullpen or the starting rotation. So we're going to try over and over and over again to make him work in the starting rotation while we're paying him.
Until your hair falls out, until you are why? Can we send him to the moon too?
And well, to my earlier point, they will make other adjustments around him, whether that be the catcher or, have a stronger defensive alignment. They will make other adjustments. And I mean, that's all part of the game. That's part of the strategy. You leverage people's strengths and adjust as needed. But at this point, Jack Flaherty was really their one potential swing and miss guy. Obviously, he's coming off a few seasons of relentless injuries, and he's really, prior to that, he really only had a half a season of where we saw this the Jack Flaherty of yore that we all want to see again.
Right.
And he's certainly very talented. He's got a lot going for him, but to rely on that and say this is our guy and he's going to come back from 2019 form, no problem. And the other 4 guys in our rotation are 4 or 5 guys at best. That's That's you're set up for
not
failure.
gonna cut it. Not
Yeah.
gonna cut it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, at this point, the St. Louis Cardinals have really kind of always been in contention, right? Like they've never
Yes.
been. I mean, they've never been super bad, but they've never been, like over the top. Just yes, going to the World Series type thing. So,
Right.
is this the first kind of season where Cardinals fans are like, what the fuck happened? Why are we in the last place? What's happening?
Well, yeah, we're definitely all caught off guard, but a big part of that is because they shouldn't be as bad as they've been, right? For as much as I'm shitting on the pitching and saying, like they need to make foundational adjustments there, still, like they have Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt, and every other piece of that team is more than good enough to make up for that. And I do
Right.
think the front office was absolutely banking on that again. And so if we were not seeing this historically slow start, rough start, none of this would be happening. And
Gotcha.
there would be much less issue of them feeling the pressure to
Send
create
down
or
Jordan
control
Walker?
or create some kind of narrative. Honestly, I'm of the mindset of Jordan Walker, like, I don't know. The only thing I have to say about that is, that it's service time. Like they are, service time manipulation. I was like, 3 words, service time manipulation. That's what I'm trying to say.
So were you surprised he ended up on the roster to begin with? Because
I was,
I
yeah.
was like,
I was.
like I thought he was gonna go into spring training and then be like, okay, to AAA you go.
Yeah,
And
I
then
think
when
it was
he ended up,
exciting. I think it was a good PR move. I think he absolutely has the talent, and no moment has been too big for him. Like he handles himself extremely well, and I think that was something that they maybe weren't expecting. So they were like, "All right, well, we can play with that. We can use that," and they used it. And then they said, "Okay, but we need to send you back down." And to a certain extent, I am always going to appreciate the business side of baseball for what it is. Like you can't even like some of the greediest, most awful corporations, you're like, well, I mean, I see why they did that. Yeah, it's
Right.
shitty, but like we get it. So I'm not saying like I want to, light the front office on fire because they are potentially using service time manipulation with Jordan Walker. But I think it's pretty obvious that and was that their only reason? Maybe not, but it's definitely heavily on the list of reasons. Yeah. And they don't have room for him right now. If he's not going to play every day, he shouldn't be up here.
Right.
So
he needs the everyday at bats. I mean, but was he was getting everyday at bats up there, was he not?
He was until he wasn't. And again, it all could have played into them seeing it all comes back. The only consistent problem that the Cardinals have is starting pitching. And it's not why they've lost every game. It's not why they've lost, as many games as they've lost necessarily, because the offense really wasn't clicking at certain points either. But it is the reason why they will always be an 80 to 90 win team and not a 90 to 100 win team. It is why they always have been. It is why they always will be until that is different at best, because at this point, they're just not going to be able to get away with that, with the way that the game is evolving for, in the way that they have the last 5 years for the next 5 years. And I think that's become really obvious.
Interesting. Very, very.
So that's my take on it anyway.
Gotcha. So what is the temperature there about the whole Tyler O'Neill, Ollie Marmol situation?
Well, not unlike,
how much time do we have?
Yeah, not unlike the Wilson Contreras situation. I think most of us, well, I don't know. I guess we're a little bit more split as a fan base on this one, at least initially, because here's the thing. People can be really hard on Tyler O'Neill. I personally am a big Tyler O'Neill fan, so I kind of already have my bias there. But I also I have nothing against Ollie Marmol. I've liked him, as much as I need to as a manager. I've nothing against him thus far. But I do think it's really interesting, especially seeing how things digressed very quickly after that, wow, something else was already going on there. And so again, it kind of comes down to the same thing with Wilson Contreras. Does it matter if he is lacking defensively? That's not what we expected from him, or that's not the critique that we're giving. We're giving the critique, if that needs to be addressed, fine. It's the way it was addressed,
right,
that we as a fan base are not cool. So same thing. I won't debate whether or not Tyler O'Neill was hustling. I personally, like, I'm a personal trainer and I'm like a nerd about mechanics and all of that stuff. Like, I think that he had some issues with one of his glutes going on, and that's fine. That's something that I saw. Not here to debate that. Regardless of his effort, the way that it was handled and the way that it was just aired out publicly obviously was a hit to the entire team. And it really breaks your trust in your leadership. And I actually did a whole episode on my podcast about leadership, kind of based around that whole instance. And yeah, I think that kind of set the tone for the first month or so of the season. And I also think, if we've been talking a lot about Yadier Molina, I think Ollie Marmol's role as manager is very different on a team with Yadier Molina than it is without. And I think that he was probably feeling a lot of that pressure, especially in the first couple weeks of the season. And that might be, a potential of why we saw him handle things differently and not as gracefully as he would have before.
So that was another kind of question, because Ollie is what, 36?
36. Yeah, 36, maybe 37 by now, but very young.
So Adam Wainwright is 40. Like, I'm like, how are you as a manager supposed to manage if your players are older than you and have been, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not, by no means am I saying like Adam Wainwright is like, sit the fuck down, Ollie. Like, this is my, like, at no point am I saying that. But I feel like maybe it would be a little bit more difficult for Ollie as a younger manager to kind of gain that respect. And I don't know if he was somehow thinking that this would not gain respect, but like, this is my team now.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of, putting it on the table and like,
that's like his
that's
new role. Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, that had to have had some sort of divide in the clubhouse. Like, it couldn't have been good for the clubhouse. But now, is Tyler O'Neill on the IL?
He is on the IL, yeah, which is another thing that, like, that's the reason people are very critical of him, or like Cardinals fans are very critical of him, because he has had a number of injuries that have kept him from playing and then obviously reaching his full potential, mostly last season, because he had a really awesome 2021 season, and we're hoping that he would just build on that. And so that was like part of this whole controversy too, was like, okay, well, do you want him? Yes, we have seen him run incredibly hard before, but we also saw him have 2 serious hamstring injuries before. So he is going to have to adjust his mechanics, and maybe we won't ever see him run at full Tyler O'Neill speed again, because he's trying to stay healthy and stay in the game. So that was a big part of that conversation too. And I think you hit the nail on the head with, the Ollie kind of trying to set a new tone of his age of leadership, again, post Yadier Molina, but also at that point, Adam Wainwright was on the IL. And so he wasn't with the team on at least like their first long road trip, maybe the first 2. Okay. And that was something that we were all talking about too, is like, you want to talk about vibes, you want to talk about an energy guy, like a leader in the clubhouse. There's definitely a different dynamic that the team was counting on. And that is half, if not more, of the reason that the Cardinals signed him again, and are keeping him around, is for his leadership in the clubhouse and for what he means to the organization.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm not gonna lie, I really thought him and Yachty were just gonna ride off into the sunset together. And then when he re-signed, I was all, what's happening there, Wayno? Like, what's going on?
Overall, he had a great season last year, and he's still got it. He had some mechanical issues that he was super upfront about at the end of last season that were from a very isolated incident that he spoke about. And so there was no reason to think, from the way that it was discussed, that he wouldn't come back and, be able to have the same sort of season that he did last year. And obviously he felt confident that he could do that without Yadier Molina. So
Right.
What?
We can pitch without Yachty? I don't know.
Yeah, it's so hard, because like, I don't want to discount anything that Yachty did for the team and for the pitchers. Like, he was a huge factor for sure, but no team is successful if it all rides on the shoulders of one person.
Right.
And how crazy that we're trying to say that one catcher is responsible for 5 poor starting pitchers and then some in the bullpen.
Well, and so what was interesting to me was that basically not your only, but overall the starting pitcher that had the least amount of issues, I guess, was Jordan Montgomery, Monty, that
Yeah.
came over, from the Yankees in that trade and didn't, I guess, wasn't used to the
Wasn't accustomed.
Javier Molina
Yes.
treatment. I don't know, like maybe did he
Right.
walk into the clubhouse and it's like, wait, you don't do your own scouting reports? Like
Yeah.
Yachty does that for you? Like I got, before, Jose Trevino, we had Kyle Higashioka and Gary Sanchez. Like they ain't doing that shit. Like you mean to tell me that I don't have to put in the work? Like he does the work for me? Cool. Like, so I wonder if that had any sort of bearing on the performance, because Monty
That is
was doing his own
interesting.
stuff.
Yeah, that is interesting to look at. Like he was certainly the least, but I mean Steven Matz, who has been, arguably the most poor performer in the Cardinals rotation. Like I don't know, I would have to look back and see exactly how many starts he had with Yachty last year, but he was only with the Cardinals since last season and he didn't play most of last season. So
Gotcha.
he was with the Mets before. Like I can't imagine. It is really interesting to consider that. We call Jordan Montgomery J Money on Cardinals Twitter. He's our guy. We love him. Feel very lucky to have him. But again, we gave up Harrison Bader for him. So if we don't have Harrison Bader making catches in center field that sometimes only Harrison Bader is going to make, then is the pitch to contact pitching rotation as effective as it once was?
So now who is the rotating outfield out there? Like
who is it this week? Well, yeah. So right now, Tyler O'Neill is on the injured list, but he would be there. There was also a lot of, and something that I was very critical of the Cardinals early on was the lack of consistency in anything. And in last year, I want to say there was over 140 different lineups from 162 games, and they're very much on track for that again this season. And in the age of analytics, that's to be expected to some extent, that you're going to look at, the direct matchup a little bit more and switch things up.
Right.
But the biggest consistency that I'm seeing through the lack of consistency from the Cardinals is what we like to refer to as feast or famine offense. Because even if you look at last season, that was like the biggest critique that we had for them as a fan base was they were scoring 2 runs or they were scoring 18 runs. There was very few and this team is built, especially this season, to win a lot of like 9-5 or 9-7 type games. Right. And I think I can't remember who it was, or I'd give you a shout out. Someone had that dialogue with me on Twitter recently. And I was like, yes, this team is built that way. So if the offense is not clicking,
it's done. You're like,
yeah, you're not going to win.
Pitching's not going to keep it close.
Exactly. But anyway, back to the outfield. There was this back and forth between, so we traded away Harrison Bader. Is Tyler O'Neill going to start in center field? There's, some upside to figuring out how to make that work with him, even though he doesn't have as much experience in center field because of his speed and because of different skill sets that we could put in place there. But then we've got Dylan Carlson, who is just like a really smart outfielder. And while like athletic ability wise, or just like who he is as a complete player may not make as much sense there on paper, but in action, like he's the one who's executing. And just again, like from the mental aspect of the game, he clearly has it all worked out there. And so that's kind of played out in a way. And then you got Lars Nootbaar, who can also play center field, but I don't know. So Dylan Carlson, I think, is our everyday center fielder, except for now Lars Nootbaar is still playing center field. I don't know. And a big part of that is still kind of off because of the fact that Tyler O'Neill is on the injured list. But I mean, good thing that Tyler O'Neill is on the injured list, because if he wasn't, then like where would we put Brendan Donovan in our lineup? Because now we can't have anybody else in that DH spot. So we got to have Nolan Gorman playing second base or Brendan Donovan playing second base. But if we want Nolan Gorman and Brendan Donovan, 2 lefties in the lineup, then we got to put one of them in the outfield. So Brendan Donovan's been in the outfield, which is fine. He is our utility Gold Glove winner for a reason. Right. But we've also got Lars Nootbaar, who is absolutely an everyday player and has to be an everyday player, especially with the way that he's hitting again this season. His on-base percentage is unreal. Like, he has to be in the lineup. So he can play any outfield position, and he's been playing them all. And then I'm like, man, who else is there? Well, we've got Jordan Walker, who isn't up here anymore. And then Alec Burleson is another guy who came up at the end of last season, didn't see a ton, wasn't like a guy to get super excited about, but he has been an on-base machine this season. He's made a couple of incredible catches now in left field. So, I mean, they're not making it any easier in terms of creating that consistency because you've just got too many guys who are earning playing time in one way or another, but they're just not all working together to make wins happen.
Right.
Until the last 2 series, which now they are.
Right.
And man, I'm just glad we got that Wilson Contreras out of the way because clearly that's what cleared
that was the issue. I'm glad we figured that out.
Yeah, but then so I haven't even mentioned Juan Yepez, who has been up and down from AAA as well, because he is a big league hitter. He's not a guy to write home about defensively, but I mean he's made some good outfield assists as well, or in big moments, and he is a big league hitter and absolutely deserves to be in a big league lineup. So do I think the Cardinals are going to be busy at the trade deadline this year? As much as I don't want to part with a single one of those guys, I hope that they are. And I think that what is happening right now is all setting it up on the business end that we don't really want to think about or care about to make
showcase. Look at all of these amazing outfielders that we have. Do I hear starting pitching for
right? And I know how bad we need starting pitching, but it's really just because we didn't have things in line with our catcher. So, yeah.
So I'm glad that you brought that up, though, because that was my next question for you: was how do you think things will shake out at the trade deadline, and which one of your outfielders, or I guess how many of your outfielders, I should say, do you see getting moved at the deadline?
Honestly, I am someone who gets very attached to these guys, so I don't want to see any of them leave. I already told you that I am a big Tyler O'Neill. We call him Bro. I'm a big Bro fan. I've got a Bro Neal sweatshirt. I love him. But I think he's probably the one that is most likely to get traded away, because the other thing that the Cardinals are notorious for is, again, that service time and wanting to, we are like 10th or 11th, I think, in payroll this year. And we're maybe not even that high, maybe like 14th or 15th. I'm not sure. We're always like right in the middle.
Right.
And the reason why the Cardinals are able to be as competitive as they are for so long and year after year is because they are conscious about all of that. And so again, not throwing shade at the business side of it. I'm not here saying like, I want you to spend Steve Cohen money, but I do think that
a little bit.
Yeah, I do think that they are more willing to part with guys like Tyler O'Neill, who is going to be a free agent at the end of 2024, and he's a Scott Boras client. And the Cardinals, I would highly doubt they're going to deal with Scott Boras in free agency. So they already know, very similarly to Harrison Bader last season, that when he hits free agency, that they're very likely parting ways. And so for them, there's just less give with that. And Tyler O'Neill's potential is huge, and his impact on winning each and every game can be really huge if he's utilized the right way. So he would be the one that I would think they would be most likely to part with. And that was like my big, huge red flag when all of that stuff went down with him and Ollie at the beginning of the season, is I was like, geez, are they just like putting him on the trade block already? Like but that also, it made no sense from that standpoint either, right? There's no good in any way, shape, or form from making your player look like they have a lack of hustle or effort. So I looked way too far into trying to make sense of all of that, though.
I'm looking at the spot track for the Cardinals, and it's up there, but it's not ridiculous. Apparently there's $7.1 million just chilling on the injured list.
Sounds about right.
All right, look at you. So, I mean, but your infielders, however, are also, I wouldn't say getting up there in age, but not the youngest of.
Yeah, and I think that's why there's more talk about like there being an outfield jam than an infield jam, because even though we have Brendan Donovan, Nolan Gorman, we have Mason Wynn in AAA Memphis, who could absolutely be on a big league team right now. That's not really being talked about as a problem because of the fact that, we know that those are moves that are going to need to be made sooner rather than later. It's, all a working system, but it's the outfielders where you're like, no, there's really way too many of you, and then some in the minors too.
Right.
So
What is Tommy Edman's role?
well, Tommy Edman is maybe my favorite player.
I love
Like
Tommy
on the
Edman.
I mean, how can you not love Tommy Edman? So Tommy Edman's role is to do whatever the hell they need him to do. They need him to bat ninth. They need him to bat leadoff. Sometimes he bats second. He always plays either second base or shortstop.
Okay.
So he's actually shortstop by trade. He was a collegiate shortstop at Stanford, but he played second base because the Cardinals had signed Paul DeJong to an extension, and he was the everyday shortstop. So Tommy Edman is a Gold Glove winning second baseman, but when Paul DeJong started to have his struggles, it was most natural to be able to move Tommy Edman over to shortstop because we have Brendan Donovan as that utility guy who can play shortstop, but he's certainly better suited for second base.
Gotcha.
And then they moved Nolan Gorman, who has been one of their top prospects, from his natural position of third base to learn second base, as that has progressed to try to keep him in the system, and they need him in the lineup. So I'm certainly hoping after his start to the season, which I very much projected would happen for him, that he is not in any kind of trade conversations, because I think we got to hang on to that. But the Paul DeJong thing is like a whole nother thing that's happening that we haven't really talked a lot about. And so he has really struggled the last few years, but they had him signed to a contract through this season. And again, we talked about the Cardinals. If we're going to pay you, we're going to play you. So he has been on and off the injured list as well the last couple of seasons. But I think it was the middle of last season where they sent him down to AAA because they were like, I mean, you can't just be a guaranteed out in this lineup. And defensively, he is above average. I would say always has been at shortstop. So we're going to use him there when we can. And fortunately, I could not be happier to say that the last few weeks since he came off the injured list, he has had a successful rehab start and has been back in the lineup most days. Like he's crushing it, and he's back in like 2019 form of when they signed him to that extension. So nobody is mad about it at this point. In fact, there's like an apology form to Paul DeJong going around Cardinals Twitter that everyone can fill out, and we'll get shared with him, I hope, because there's a lot of people that owe him apologies for sure. But I've always been, rooting for Paul DeJong, not just because we have a lot of money in him, but he and I went to the same college. We are Illinois State University alumni. And I just think, I like to talk about the human side of baseball sometimes because I think it's easy to overlook. And he is someone who he's 26 years old, I think. He has $26 million in the bank of guaranteed money from playing baseball, and he was pre-med in college. He can go do whatever the hell he wants, but he's sticking with his team and trying to make the most of it. And, they haven't DFA'd him like everybody's been calling for years now, because they see the work and the dedication that he has to it. And I'm just glad to see that he's finally getting some production out of it, and he's absolutely helping this team win right now.
Awesome. So when he plays shortstop, then that moves Tommy Edman to second base.
Yeah. Or it gives Tommy a day off, kind of depending. Again, you're going to see a different lineup. I think it was game 1 and game 2 of the Red Sox series. We had the same lineup 2 days in a row. That was the first time that has happened this season. And I was shocked, but I was like, Ollie's been listening to Peace, Love, and Baseball, because he heard me say, you got to go with what works. If it's working, don't change it.
You're like, we like some consistency here, Ollie.
Right.
Come on now. Okay. All right. So, it, like I said, it was interesting being on the outside looking in to seeing all of the, not so much similarities, but I guess like the differences in catching philosophies and all of that kind of stuff. And I was like, I need to talk to Cardinals people. Let's do that. So, I was not, again, aware that Cardinals and Astros Twitter were in some. I was like, why do we not like the Cardinals? What's happening? And they're like, tell me you have been a longtime fan without telling me you haven't been a longtime fan.
Yeah.
And well, I'm sorry, but and they're like, the Cardinals always used to kill us when we were in the NL. I'm like, we haven't been in the NL in like how long?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, I barely remember that, but
and I was like, tell me that you're 95 fucking years old without telling me you're 95. I'm like, I mean, at this point, like I don't see the Cardinals as, Astros competition. I mean, like if anything, it's like the Yankees and I don't know, whatever the fuck the Mariners are trying to do with us. Like that's what that is. I'm all, No, don't
Have
commit
you
me.
read the book that just came out in February by Evan Drellich? It's called Winning Fixes Everything.
I have not.
I think
I have
you and
read
I need to have
excerpts.
we need to have like a book club on it and like maybe
Okay.
come back and have a discussion on it because I learned a lot about the Cardinals Astros dynamic that I knew absolutely nothing about from that
Interesting.
book. The whole like first half of it, I was like, I thought this was about the Astros cheating scandal. And they're like talking about the Cardinals. And I'm like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
So it all goes back to all of that too, I'm sure, which was about 20 years ago or
Okay.
so. So
Okay. Well, I did remember when I was like trying to figure out the whole like Cardinals thing. I was like, what's with Cardinals? And then there was that whole, like the Cardinals employees
yeah.
like stole computers. And I was like, computers? What? And they're like, oh yeah, no, like people went to prison. I'm all, what? I was
Yeah.
like, we're just gonna gloss over that. Like, no one's gonna talk about that. Like, what? I was very confused on why that was not a bigger issue, but
Yeah, well,
you
again,
know.
I think as fans, and I don't blame anyone for this by any means, because for us, we want to have a different perspective on it and enjoy it the way we want to, and we
Right.
should. But it's easy to ignore the business side of it. And in the last 20 years, and that's really kind of how this book all starts out. In the last 20 years, it's only become more and more business in all different sorts of ways. So I think me saying that I think the Cardinals have any kind of service time manipulation angle on Jordan Walker would be a very unpopular opinion. I think even among Cardinals fans, because they just don't want to think that. And the writers that write for the team are certainly not going
Obviously
to
not. Right.
say that. So I'll say it. I think
You're like,
we gotta
I'm
be
not getting paid by the
real
team.
here. So yeah, I think it's an easy thing to want to overlook.
Mhm.
The business side of things, and that's why we don't hear a lot about that, but it's really interesting.
Yeah. I was in a Twitter space ow, my cat is currently digging his claws into me. I'm sorry. I was in a Twitter space the other night with a bunch of random fans, but it was Yankees fans, Astros fans, Red Sox fans. And it was a very interesting chat that we had in there because it turned into, oh well, 2017 didn't really count and blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, like that's fine. Like if you want to believe that's okay, like too. But if you're gonna come at me about that, like we need to have a very serious discussion on literally all of the other black eyes that MLB is like trying to gloss over, and you're gonna sit here and tell me that this was the worst thing. I'm pretty sure Tyler Skaggs has a whole different view on MLB than this. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm all, like literal drugs being given to players in the clubhouse, and someone died, like legitimately died from this. So you mean like, no, like don't come at me about that unless you're willing to talk about all the other things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine, Suzy. And I'm like, I'm just saying, like, that's
we don't
want
to think about that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, we can have a discussion, but you can't sit there and tell me that banging on a trash can is the worst thing that has happened to MLB in the history of MLB. Like, we can't do that, guys. So
the integrity of the sport.
Right. I'm all, talk to me again about the integrity of the sport with the spitballs and no, damn right. But I'm like, that's a whole other episode that we can we can go on to. But well, Kelsey, I appreciate you hanging out with me today and kind of giving us a glimpse into Cardinals world. Is there anything, tell the people where they can find you on all of the social medias and whatnot, and then final thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm most active with all the baseball things on my Twitter account at KBirdTweets, which is right below you. It's not Bird with an I, it's Bird with a U. KBirdTweets, and then I've got a link tree in my Twitter bio there to both of my podcasts, but they're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And Peace, Love, and Baseball is weekly on Tuesdays. It is about baseball, but it's about a lot of other things, and I love hearing about what people want to talk about. So I am a singer and an actor and a personal trainer and a baseball enthusiast. So I, share some of my personal expertise, but I also love having people on that have different areas of expertise and just kind of highlighting how much we all have to learn from each other, I think is what I have really found that Peace, Love, and Baseball is really all about. And then, of course, we like to talk about baseball from a little bit more of, I think stats are really interesting, and I am a very analytical person myself, but the baseball conversation as a little bit more like we had today. It's a little bit more on the human side of things and that human element that the business side might be trying to take out more and more. And there's obvious reasons for that, but it's always going to be such a big part of the game, and it's such a big part of what connects us to the game. So that is that podcast. Check it out. And yeah, I'm going to London for the Cubs Cardinals series in about a month. I like to, play with different content. I've got my little baby microphone, so I'll be, interviewing UK fans on the street, and we'll see how that goes. Would love to orchestrate maybe a meetup of baseball fans that are over there for that series on Twitter. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, Suzy, I've got to get you on Peace, Love, and Baseball. And it sounds like we're going to do a Babes collab. And it's been awesome chatting with you and just getting another great fan's perspective.
Yeah. Again, you can follow Kelsey at her Twitter. I have linked it in the show description as well. And then this podcast will be available Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all of that fun stuff. And then when that is shared, obviously all of those links will go out too. So make sure that you guys go and follow Kelsey for all of the Cardinals content. Babes podcast. I don't know if I can really encourage people to follow that one.
I try to keep the Yankees fans in line, man. We talk about, I really am dedicated to making that be about baseball, league wide. And
right.
Join me over there. We got to help keep them on track.
Wait, I may. I don't know. Well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later. We'll do a whole test run and see how that works out. But no, I'm just kidding. Yana has been nothing but super awesome towards Astros fans, like myself and whatnot. And as Astros fans, we sometimes are a little bit more defensive than maybe we should be. It may be because of the 43 years that we've had to endure everybody talking at us and whatnot. But it is what it is. Like I said, I joined baseball and my baseball fandom after the 2017 season.
Yeah,
so I
was
was
like, don't look at me.
I'm like, what happened? I don't know what was going on. Like what? So again, Kelsey, again, I appreciate you coming on and hanging out with me. And yeah, I'm super excited to collaborate again. Like I said, go check out Kelsey on Twitter. Information will be on the bio. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and rate Bourbon and Baseball, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Also, you guys can join me on the new Relevant app. That's RELEVNT. Doing in-game broadcasts and shenanigans over there on the Relevant app. Oh, it's really so. I'm like, if you want to check out an Astros game, Kelsey.
Yeah, that would be the way to do it. That sounds awesome.
There's lots of drinking games and shenanigans. Like I said,
love it.
It's fun. So you guys can check me out over there. I still don't have a co-host. They're looking for one, but apparently I just am just too awesome that people can't handle my awesome. No, that's not it at all. I'm done. But yeah, so again, we appreciate. I have a gift, Kelsey. I have a gift. No. So again, we appreciate you guys and share, like, do all of those things, and we will see you guys later. Yay, baseball!
We love you, Wilson.
I mean, I only kind of mildly like you, Wilson, but it is what it is.